The massive metal doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the enormous circular room buzzed with conversation as delegates from across the galaxy took their seats. The chamber was built to accommodate hundreds of different species, with seating areas adjusted for various body types and environmental needs. Dr. Elena Vasquez walked quietly through the entrance, her small human form barely noticed among the towering aliens around her. She wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by many other delegates. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her brown eyes moved carefully around the room, taking in the incredible diversity of life forms present. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering. The walls curved upward in a perfect dome, covered in a shimmering material that could display any environment needed for different species' comfort. Today it showed a peaceful starfield, slowly rotating to give the illusion of being in open space. Gravity fields varied throughout the room, allowing species from high and low gravity worlds to feel comfortable in their designated areas. Elena made her way to the observer section, a smaller area near the back where representatives from probationary species were allowed to sit. Earth had only been part of the Galactic Council for 3 years, and humans were still considered newcomers who needed to prove themselves worthy of full membership. The observer seats were simple compared to the elaborate platforms used by senior council members. As she settled into her chair, Elena noticed the look she received from nearby delegates. A group of tall, blue-skinned Altarians glanced in her direction and immediately began whispering among themselves. Their crystalline translator devices made soft chiming sounds as they spoke in their native language. Elena caught a few translated words floating in the air near them: primitive, fragile, and amusing. The session was called to order by the current moderator, a massive insectoid creature called Kethmori Prime Designate Zixthala, standing nearly 3 meters tall on 6 powerful legs, with forearms ending in sharp claws. The Kethmori was an impressive sight. Its compound eyes swept across the chamber as it spoke in the deep, clicking language of its species. Translation devices throughout the room immediately converted the words into hundreds of different languages. "Welcome, honored delegates, to the quarterly planetary classification review," Zixthala announced. "Today we will examine 17 worlds for potential classification changes, trade route adjustments, and colonization suitability assessments." The session began with routine matters that Elena found both fascinating and tedious. Worlds were discussed like items on a shopping list, their entire ecosystems and civilizations reduced to simple categories: safe, moderate risk, high risk, extreme caution, or the rarely used prohibited classifications. A water world called Aquanis 7 was upgraded from safe to moderate risk due to increased volcanic activity. The delegates voted quickly and moved on. A frozen planet in the Vega system was downgraded from moderate risk to safe after its native ice bears went extinct, removing the primary threat to potential colonists. Elena listened carefully to each discussion, trying to understand the complex politics behind seemingly simple decisions. She noticed how certain species always voted together, forming blocs that could influence outcomes. The Altarians, Zephyrians, and Molluscan delegations seemed to coordinate their positions, while the warrior-like Rajathi often stood alone in their aggressive stance toward any world that might pose even minor challenges. As the morning progressed, the delegates grew more relaxed. Many began chatting casually between votes, treating the session like a social gathering rather than serious governmental business. Servers moved through the aisles offering refreshments suited to different species' dietary needs. The atmosphere was almost festive. Elena remained quiet in her observer section, occasionally taking notes on a small electronic pad. She had been sent to observe and learn, not to participate. Earth's full council membership was still under review, and any mistake could set back human diplomatic progress by years. The Zephyrian delegate, a tall crystalline being that looked like living glass, was telling an amusing story about a recent vacation to a pleasure world. Its harmonic voice created beautiful music as it spoke, causing several nearby delegates to laugh in their various ways. The sound filled the chamber with an odd mixture of roars, clicks, musical tones, and electronic beeps. And then, the Zephyrian continued, "The tour guide actually suggested we visit the dangerous wildlife preserve. Apparently, the local creatures were considered mildly aggressive because they might bite if cornered. The translation made the harmonic laughter sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. This comment triggered a round of similar stories from other delegates. A slug-like molluscan representative shared tales of worlds where the deadly local life consisted of creatures no larger than their own offspring. An Altarian diplomat described visiting a planet where the natives were afraid of their own weather patterns. Some species are just naturally timid, observed a gaseous Vorthani delegate, its voice emerging from a complex mechanical suit that contained its atmospheric body. They see danger everywhere, even in the most peaceful environments. Elena felt a slight tension in her jaw but kept her expression neutral. She had heard similar comments about humans many times since Earth joined the galactic community. Most species seem to view humans as an example of how even weak, fearful creatures could eventually develop space travel if given enough time and favorable conditions. The lunch break came and went with more casual conversation. Elena ate her simple meal alone, listening to the chatter around her. She heard fragments of discussion about trade routes, colonial rights, and military alliances. The politics of the galaxy were incredibly complex, with thousands of species forming an intricate web of relationships, treaties, and rivalries. When the session resumed, Zixthala announced that they would now review several worlds for potential classification changes. We have received petitions for upgrades and downgrades based on updated survey data and changing conditions, the Keth Mori explained. The first few reviews went quickly. A mining world was upgraded due to increased radiation levels. A garden world maintained its safe classification despite a minor increase in atmospheric storms. Then Zixthala's compound eyes focused on the next item on the agenda. Next, we have a petition to review the classification of the world designated as Earth, home to the species known as humans. The moderator's translator seemed to struggle slightly with the human words, making them sound awkward and foreign. A ripple of soft laughter moved through the chamber. Elena noticed several delegates turning to look at her with what appeared to be amusement. The Altarian group was barely containing their mirth, their blue faces showing expressions that clearly indicated they found the topic entertaining. Earth is currently classified as moderate risk. Class 7, Zixthala continued reading from the official records. The petition suggests this classification may be overly generous, given the documented capabilities and adaptability of the native species. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Elena felt her hands tighten slightly on her notepad, but she maintained her composed expression. Around her, the greatest minds and leaders of galactic civilization were preparing to debate her world, as if it were nothing more than an interesting curiosity. The formal review was about to begin, and Elena realized she was about to witness something that would change everything. She took a deep breath and prepared to listen as hundreds of alien species discussed whether her homeworld deserved to be considered even mildly dangerous. The chamber fell into an expectant quiet as Zixthala prepared to present the details of Earth's current classification and the proposed changes. Elena sat perfectly still, her human presence barely noticed among the giants of galactic politics, waiting to see how her species and world would be judged. The holographic display above the council chamber flickered to life, showing a three-dimensional image of Earth slowly rotating in space. The blue and green world looked peaceful and inviting as it turned in the artificial light. Soft clouds drifted across continents and the ocean sparkled with reflected starlight. "Beautiful world," commented the Zephyrian delegate, its crystalline form creating musical tones. "Very standard terrestrial planet. I can see why the inhabitants developed such gentle dispositions." Several delegates nodded in agreement. From their perspective, Earth looked like countless other garden worlds scattered throughout the galaxy, the kind of place where evolution moved slowly and carefully, producing species that were more focused on survival than conquest. Zixthala began reading from the official report. Earth, third planet from a G-type star, gravity 1.0 galactic standard, though slightly higher than optimal for most species, atmosphere composed primarily of nitrogen and oxygen, with trace gases. Temperature ranges from -40 to +50 degrees Celsius across various regions. -40, exclaimed a molluscan delegate, its slug-like body shuddering inside its environmental suit. "How do the poor creatures survive such extreme cold?" "They probably hibernate," suggested an Altarian, causing another wave of gentle laughter. Like many primitive species, they must have developed simple coping mechanisms. Elena watched the display showing Earth's basic statistics. Everything looked so normal and harmless when presented this way. The report focused on averages and general conditions, making her homeworld seem like any other habitable planet. There was no mention of hurricanes, earthquakes, or volcanic eruptions. No discussion of the creatures that lived in Earth's oceans or the weather patterns that could kill without warning. The native species, humans, appear to be standard carbon-based life forms. Zixthala continued. Average height 1.7 meters, average weight 70 kilograms. No natural armor, claws, or defensive capabilities. No venom production or natural weapons of any kind. This information caused a stir of sympathetic sounds throughout the chamber. Many delegates seemed genuinely sorry for humans, viewing them as unfortunate creatures who had somehow managed to survive despite being completely defenseless. "How sad," murmured the Vorthani representative, its mechanical voice echoing with artificial emotion. "They must live in constant fear on their own world." "At least they managed to develop technology," added a Rajathi delegate, its lion-like mane bristling with what might have been pity. Perhaps their fear motivated them to create tools for protection. Elena bit her tongue as the comments continued. She wanted to speak up, to correct their assumptions, but she knew that as an observer she had no right to interrupt the proceedings. She could only sit and listen as her species was discussed like helpless children who had somehow stumbled into space travel. The Altarian delegate, who had been most vocal earlier, raised one of its forearms. "Honored moderator, I believe we should consider the psychological impact of maintaining an inflated classification for this world. The humans themselves might develop an unrealistic sense of their own capabilities if we continue to classify their gentle home as moderately dangerous." "An excellent point," agreed another Altarian. "We have a responsibility to help developing species understand their place in the galactic community. False confidence could lead to dangerous situations." Zixthala's compound eyes studied the display showing Earth's rotation. The current classification was established based on preliminary surveys conducted 3 years ago. Perhaps those surveys were overly cautious. A molluscan delegate spoke up, its translator making wet, sliding sounds as it converted the creature's native communication. "I have visited many worlds classified as moderate risk. They typically feature dangerous predators, hostile weather patterns, or toxic environments. This Earth appears to have none of these characteristics." "Exactly," chimed in the Zephyrian. "Look at those peaceful oceans, those calm land masses. Where are the obvious threats? Where are the massive predators or violent storms?" Elena felt her heart rate increase as the delegates continued their analysis. They were looking at sanitized data that showed only Earth's gentlest face. The official reports had apparently focused on temperate regions during calm seasons, completely ignoring the full reality of her world's nature. "The vegetation appears quite docile as well," observed a delegate from a species Elena didn't recognize. "Green plants indicating standard photosynthesis. No obvious carnivorous species, no toxic emissions. Very garden world typical. And the atmospheric composition," added the Vorthani, "is well within normal parameters for peaceful worlds. No corrosive gases, no pressure extremes, no radiation concerns. Really quite hospitable." The discussion continued for another hour, with delegate after delegate pointing out Earth's apparently benign characteristics. They compared it favorably to vacation worlds and retirement planets, places where elder members of various species went to live out their final years in comfort and safety. "I motion that we downgrade Earth to Class 4. Low risk," announced the lead Altarian delegate. "This would be more appropriate for a world that has produced such obviously peaceful inhabitants." "Class 4 seems generous," countered a Rajathi representative. "I have seen the humans at diplomatic functions. They are small, quiet, and clearly uncomfortable in challenging situations. Their world must be exceptionally safe to have produced such timid creatures." "Perhaps Class 3, suggested the molluscan delegate. "Safe for colonization with minimal precautions." Elena's hands gripped her notepad tightly enough that her knuckles turned white. She watched in growing disbelief as the galaxy's most advanced civilizations completely misunderstood everything about her world and her species. They saw humans as proof that Earth was safe, when the reality was exactly the opposite. The debate grew more animated as delegates began competing to show their understanding of planetary classification standards. Each seemed eager to demonstrate their expertise by explaining why Earth clearly deserved a lower risk rating. "Consider the evidence," said the Zephyrian, its harmonic voice rising with enthusiasm. "A species with no natural weapons, no armor, no apparent survival instincts beyond basic tool use. This could only evolve on a world completely free from selective pressure. The gravity is actually a point in favor of reclassification," added an Altarian. "At 1.0 standard, it is higher than optimal, which would normally indicate increased danger. But since the natives are obviously adapted to peaceful conditions, this suggests the world's gravity is the only challenging aspect." Elena realized that the delegates' own assumptions were blinding them to the truth. They expected dangerous worlds to produce dangerous-looking species, and since humans appeared harmless to them, Earth must be harmless as well. They had no concept that a truly dangerous world might forge its inhabitants into something that looked deceptively peaceful. The discussion was reaching its conclusion. Zixthala raised one clawed arm for attention. "Based on the evidence presented and the clear consensus of this body, I believe we are ready to vote on reclassifying Earth to a lower risk category." "Before we vote," interrupted the Rajathi delegate with what sounded like amusement, "perhaps we should ask the human representative if she has any objections to acknowledging that her world is actually quite safe." A wave of laughter swept through the chamber. Most delegates found the idea hilarious that someone from such an obviously peaceful world might object to having their home classified as safer than previously thought. Elena felt hundreds of alien eyes turning toward her. Some were amused, some were curious, and some showed the kind of patronizing patience usually reserved for children. She took a deep breath and prepared to respond to the greatest misunderstanding in galactic history. The way, Chamber waited expectantly for the small human to agree with their obvious conclusion about her harmless little world. The laughter in the chamber grew louder as delegates began sharing their own observations about humans and Earth. Elena sat perfectly still in her observer chair, listening to species from across the galaxy explain why her world was obviously one of the safest places in the universe. "I met a human trader last month," chuckled a Vorthani delegate, its mechanical voice box producing sounds that resembled electronic hiccups. "The poor creature was wearing protective gear just to walk around our space station. If they need protection in controlled environments, imagine how sheltered they must be on their home world." "Oh yes," agreed a crystalline Zephyrian, its harmonic tones creating what sounded like musical laughter. "I have heard they require special atmospheric suits to visit most other worlds. Such delicate respiratory systems could only develop in the most pristine environments." Elena's jaw tightened slightly as she listened to the comments. She remembered the trader they were discussing. He had worn protective gear because the space station's atmosphere contained trace amounts of hydrogen sulfide that would have slowly poisoned him over several days. The Vorthani considered it harmless because their species thrived in gas-giant atmospheres, but it would have been lethal to most oxygen-breathing life forms. "They also seem to have very limited temperature tolerance," observed a molluscan delegate, its slug-like form glistening under the chamber's lights. "I have seen humans shivering in temperatures that most species would consider pleasantly cool." "Narrow environmental parameters," nodded an Altarian. "Classic sign of a species that evolved in stable, protected conditions. No need to adapt to extremes when your world provides constant comfort." The Rajathi delegate, its mane-like crest rustling with amusement, leaned forward in its seat. "I have also noticed their aversion to conflict. At diplomatic gatherings, they always seek peaceful solutions, even to minor disputes. Such pacifist tendencies could only emerge from a world where violence is virtually unknown." Elena's fingers drummed silently against her notepad. The Rajathi was interpreting human diplomacy as weakness, not understanding that humans had learned the value of peace precisely because they knew the true cost of war. A species that had never faced real violence might be more casual about conflict, not less. "The evidence is overwhelming," declared the lead Altarian delegate, rising to address the chamber. "We have before us a species that clearly requires artificial protection to survive in normal galactic environments. They wear extra coverings, need special breathing apparatus, and avoid physical confrontation whenever possible. These are not the characteristics of beings from a dangerous world." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled delegates. Elena could see heads nodding and hear the various sounds that different species made to express consensus. The decision seemed inevitable. Zixthala, the Keth Mori moderator, checked the official proceedings on its display screen. Are there any objections to proceeding with a vote to reclassify Earth from Moderate Risk Class 7 to Low Risk Class 4? The chamber fell into an expectant quiet. This was a formality, of course. Everyone could see that Earth clearly deserved a lower classification. The original assessment had obviously been a bureaucratic error or perhaps excessive caution on the part of the initial survey team. Elena felt the weight of hundreds of gazes upon her. Most of the attention was casual, almost bored. A few delegates seemed amused by the idea that anyone might object to their obvious conclusion. The Rajathi representative was actually grinning, showing impressive fangs as it waited for the harmless human to confirm what everyone already knew. Slowly, carefully, Elena raised her right hand. The gesture was simple and unremarkable by human standards. She had done it thousands of times in classrooms, meetings, and social gatherings throughout her life. It was the most basic way to request permission to speak, so automatic that she barely thought about the movement. But something strange happened as her hand rose above her head. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The casual chatter that had filled the chamber for hours suddenly died away. Delegates who had been lounging comfortably in their seats straightened up, their attention focused entirely on the small human figure in the observer section. The massive holographic display above the chamber, which had been showing Earth's peaceful rotation, flickered. Static ran across the image like cracks in glass. The display wavered, struggled, and then froze completely, showing a single moment of Earth suspended in artificial starlight. Elena felt a strange sensation, as if the air around her had become thicker and heavier. The environmental systems throughout the chamber seemed to be working harder, fans whirring faster to maintain proper atmospheric conditions for the hundreds of different species present. Zixathala's compound eyes focused on Elena with an intensity that made her skin crawl. The massive insectoid's mandibles clicked nervously as it processed what it was seeing. Around the chamber, delegates were shifting in their seats, some leaning forward, others pulling back as if suddenly uncertain about something they couldn't quite identify. Zixathala's translator struggled with the words, creating an awkward pause. The human delegate wishes to speak? The question carried undertones of confusion and something that might have been concern. The translator was having difficulty processing the concept, as if the idea of a human requesting to address the council was somehow unprecedented or impossible. Elena stood up slowly, her movement deliberate and controlled. Although she was smaller than most beings in the chamber, barely reaching the shoulder height of the nearest delegates, something about her presence seemed to expand beyond her physical form. The empty space around her chair felt larger somehow, as if other delegates were unconsciously giving her more room. "I would like to address the council regarding Earth's classification," Elena said in a clear, steady voice that carried perfectly through the suddenly silent chamber. Her words seemed to echo longer than they should have in the acoustic space. The translation systems throughout the chamber worked flawlessly, converting her statement into hundreds of different languages simultaneously, but there was something about her tone that seemed to bypass the translators entirely. The Altarian delegate who had been most vocal about reclassification was staring at Elena with an expression that looked almost confused. Its blue skin had taken on a slightly paler shade, and its forearms were held rigidly at its sides instead of in their usual relaxed positions. "You wish to object to the reclassification?" Zixathala asked, its clicking voice uncertain. "I wish to provide additional information that may be relevant to your decision," Elena replied calmly. The chamber remained absolutely silent. No one was chatting, no one was moving, no one was making the casual sounds that had filled the space all day. Hundreds of the galaxy's most powerful and intelligent beings sat frozen, waiting to hear what the small human had to say. Elena looked around the chamber, making brief eye contact with delegates from dozens of different species. Some met her gaze, others looked away quickly as if they had seen something they didn't understand. "I believe there may be some gaps in the information you have reviewed about Earth," she continued, her voice remaining perfectly calm and professional. "Before you vote, I would like to share some details that were not included in the official reports." The holographic display flickered again, static running across the frozen image of Earth. Somewhere in the chamber's environmental systems, a fan stuttered and then resumed its normal operation. Elena waited patiently for permission to continue, her hand still raised, her presence somehow filling the enormous chamber despite her small size. Around her, The greatest civilizations in the galaxy sat in absolute silence, waiting to learn what they had missed about the small blue world that had produced this unexpectedly unsettling representative. The vote that had seemed so certain just moments before was suddenly very much in question. Zixthala's mandibles clicked nervously as it gestured toward Elena with one of its clawed arms. The human delegate has permission to address the council. Elena lowered her hand and took a step forward, moving into the center aisle where her voice would carry better. The simple movement caused several nearby delegates to shift backward in their seats, though none of them seemed to understand why they were doing so. "Thank you, honored moderator," Elena said, her voice carrying a tone of respect that somehow managed to sound dangerous. "I appreciate the council's willingness to hear additional information about Earth before making your final decision." She paused, looking around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces watching her. Some looked curious, others confused, and a few appeared to be experiencing something that might have been the beginning of concern. "The official reports you have reviewed are accurate but incomplete," Elena began, her words measured and clear. "They focus on Earth's average conditions and general characteristics, which do present a peaceful appearance. However, they do not include information about the events that shaped life on my world." The holographic display above the chamber flickered back to life, still showing Earth's rotation. Elena gestured toward it as she spoke. "Earth has experienced 5 major mass extinction events in its history. The most recent occurred 65 million years ago, when an asteroid impact eliminated 75% of all life on the planet, including the dominant species of that era." A few delegates exchanged glances. Extinction events were not uncommon in galactic history, but 5 major ones suggested a world with unusual challenges. Each time life was nearly destroyed on Earth, it adapted and returned stronger than before, Elena continued. The survivors of these events were not the largest or most powerful creatures. They were the most adaptable, the most resilient, and the most capable of enduring extreme conditions. She began walking slowly along the center aisle as she spoke, her movement causing delegates to track her with their eyes. Something about her presence made it impossible to look away. Humans evolved alongside creatures that most galactic citizens would classify as extremely dangerous predators. We shared our world with beings that could crush vehicles, inject lethal venom, or tear through metal with their teeth and claws. The molluscan delegate made a wet, sliding sound of disbelief. "Surely you exaggerate. If such creatures existed, how did your species survive?" Elena's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "We learned to hunt them." A ripple of unease moved through the chamber. The concept of prey-hunting predators was contrary to most species' understanding of natural order. "Let me tell you about Earth's weather patterns," Elena said, her voice taking on a conversational tone that somehow made her words more unsettling. "We experience rotating storm systems called hurricanes that can level entire cities. The winds exceed 200 kilometers per hour, and the storms can span hundreds of kilometers in diameter." She gestured again toward the holographic Earth. "We also have tornadoes, which are smaller rotating columns of air that can reach wind speeds of over 500 kilometers per hour. They can tear buildings apart and lift vehicles into the air." The chamber was absolutely silent now. Several delegates were leaning forward, trying to process this information. "Humans consider these normal weather events," Elena continued. "We have warning systems to track them, and many of us go outside to watch them for entertainment. We call it storm chasing." The Zephyrian delegate's crystalline form was vibrating at a frequency that created discordant musical notes. "Entertainment?" it managed to ask. "Oh yes," Elena said, her tone becoming almost cheerful. "We also enjoy activities like mountain climbing, where we scale vertical rock faces using only our hands and feet, often hanging hundreds of meters above the ground with nothing but thin ropes for safety." She paused to let this sink in before continuing. "We also practice skydiving, where we deliberately jump from aircraft at high altitude and fall toward the ground at terminal velocity before opening parachutes at the last possible moment. Some humans do this without parachutes, landing in small nets or bodies of water." The holographic display suddenly changed, showing new images that had not been in the original survey. The peaceful oceans Elena had seen earlier were replaced with footage of massive creatures moving through dark water. "These are some of the life forms that share Earth's oceans with humans," Elena explained as the display showed creatures that dwarfed most of the species present in the chamber. Blue whales, which can reach 30 meters in length, Giant squids with tentacles longer than most species' starships. Great white sharks with teeth designed to tear through flesh and bone. The images continued cycling, showing increasingly incredible creatures. Jellyfish with stings that could kill in minutes. Electric eels that could generate enough power to stun large prey. Crocodiles that had remained virtually unchanged for millions of years because they were already perfectly designed killing machines. Humans swim in these waters recreationally, Elena said casually. We have developed something called shark diving, where we deliberately enter the water with these predators for the experience of observing them closely. The Rajathi delegate's mane was now standing completely on end, a sign of extreme agitation in its species. This is impossible, it growled. No species could survive such conditions. Elena turned toward the leonine alien with an expression of mild interest. Would you like to know about Earth's land predators as well? Without waiting for an answer, she continued. We evolved alongside creatures called bears, which can weigh over 800 kilograms and move at speeds of 60 kilometers per hour. We shared territory with big cats similar to your own species, but larger and more aggressive. We coexisted with venomous snakes, poisonous spiders, and insects that could kill with a single sting. The display was now showing images of these creatures, and the effect on the chamber was dramatic. Delegates were shifting uncomfortably, some standing up as if preparing to leave. The environmental systems were working harder, trying to manage the stress pheromones and chemical signals being released by hundreds of different species. But perhaps most interesting, Elena said, her voice now carrying an edge that made several delegates flinch, is how humans adapted to these conditions. We didn't develop armor or natural weapons. We didn't evolve venom or enhanced physical strength. She stopped walking and faced the assembled delegates directly. Instead, we became the most successful persistence hunters in Earth's history. We learned to track prey for days across any terrain. We developed the ability to run long distances in extreme heat, chasing animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. We created tools that could kill at range, and we learned to work together in coordinated groups that could bring down creatures many times our individual size. The silence in the chamber was now complete. Elena could hear the mechanical sounds of life support systems, and the nervous breathing of delegates who required atmospheric respiration. Every human child learns to navigate environments that would kill most galactic citizens within minutes, she said, her voice soft but somehow penetrating every corner of the vast chamber. We consider it basic education. By the age of 10, most human children can identify dozens of potentially lethal situations and know how to avoid or survive them. Elena looked around the chamber one more time, meeting the eyes of delegates who now seemed to be seeing her for the first time. So when you ask whether Earth deserves a Class 7 moderate risk classification, she concluded, I want you to understand what you are really asking. You are asking whether a world that forged humans in the fires of constant survival challenges might possibly pose some small danger to visitors who evolved in safer environments. The holographic display flickered one more time and then went completely dark, leaving the chamber in the dim lighting of emergency systems. In the shadows, Elena's small human form somehow seemed larger and far more dangerous than it had moments before. The emergency lighting cast long shadows across the council chamber as delegates sat in stunned silence. The holographic display had gone completely dark, but Elena wasn't finished. She stood in the center aisle, her small human form somehow commanding the attention of hundreds of the galaxy's most powerful beings. I have one more thing to share with you, Elena said, her voice cutting through the darkness with perfect clarity, something that I think will help you understand what Earth really is. She reached into her diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small device. With a quick gesture, she activated it, and new images began projecting into the air around her. Unlike the official survey data, these images were taken by humans for humans. The first image showed a human city built directly next to an active volcano. Steam and lava flows were visible in the background while millions of people went about their daily lives in the foreground. This is Naples, Italy, Elena explained. 3 million humans live in the shadow of Mount Vesuvius, a volcano that has destroyed cities multiple times throughout history. They know it will erupt again. They live there anyway. The image changed to show gleaming skyscrapers swaying in strong winds during a massive storm. This is Miami, Florida, during a Category 4 hurricane. Those buildings are designed to bend rather than break. The humans inside them consider this normal architecture for dealing with routine weather. Another image appeared. showing children playing on a beach while massive waves crashed in the background. Human children playing during a winter storm on the coast of Ireland. The water temperature is near freezing. The waves could easily kill them, and they consider this entertainment. The Vorthani delegate's mechanical voice box emitted a sound like electronic choking. They let their offspring play in lethal conditions? We call it building character, Elena replied with what was definitely a smile now. Human children are expected to learn risk assessment and survival skills through experience. We have a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. More images flashed through the air. Humans climbing mountains without oxygen. Humans diving to ocean depths that would crush most species. Humans running marathons through deserts where the temperature could cook food. We have turned survival into sport, Elena continued. We have competitions to see who can endure the most dangerous conditions. We pay money to experience fear and danger in controlled environments. We have entire industries built around helping humans safely experience things that could kill them. The chamber's main lighting suddenly flickered back to life, revealing delegates who looked fundamentally different than they had an hour earlier. Many were pressed back into their seats, their body language screaming fear or submission. Others were leaning forward with expressions of fascination mixed with horror. But perhaps most importantly, Elena said, her voice now carrying overtones that seemed to bypass the translation devices entirely, humans don't just survive on Earth, we thrive there. We have built a global civilization in the most dangerous environments our world has to offer. New images showed human settlements in every conceivable environment. Cities in deserts where the heat could kill in hours, research stations in Antarctica, where the cold was beyond most species' tolerance, offshore platforms in oceans full of massive predators, space stations orbiting a star that regularly emitted radiation bursts. We live everywhere on Earth, Elena explained. In places where your survey teams needed special equipment just to take readings, human families raise children and grow food. We have made gardens in deserts, built homes on ice sheets, and established permanent settlements in locations that your classification systems would label as uninhabitable. Zixa. Thala's compound eyes were fixed on Elena with an intensity that made the air around the massive insectoid shimmer. What are you saying? It asked, its translator struggling with concepts that seemed to have no equivalent in galactic languages. Elena turned to face the moderator directly. I am saying that humans are not the product of a safe world, honored moderator. We are the product of a world so dangerous that it forged us into something your classifications cannot adequately describe. She gestured toward the images still floating in the air around her. Every human in this chamber's database has survived conditions that would be classified as extreme hazard zones by galactic safety standards. Every human child learns to identify and avoid dangers that most species have never encountered. Every human adult carries within them the accumulated survival wisdom of millions of years of evolution on a world that has tried to kill our ancestors every single day. The silence in the chamber was now so complete that Elena could hear her own heartbeat. She looked around at the hundreds of faces watching her, seeing understanding begin to dawn in alien eyes. You see humans as small and weak because we look harmless to you, she said softly. You assume our world is safe because we appear vulnerable. But you have it backwards. We look the way we do because our world is so dangerous that it shaped us into perfect survivors who don't need to look threatening. She paused, letting her words sink in. A human can run for hours without stopping. A human can go days without water and weeks without food. A human can survive temperatures that would kill most species, pressure changes that would rupture organs, and radiation levels that would sterilize entire worlds. We heal from injuries that would be permanent for other species, and we can adapt to environments that have never existed in galactic space. Elena's smile was now clearly visible, and something about it made several delegates stand up as if preparing to flee. We are not prey that learn to use tools, she said, her voice carrying across the chamber like the whisper of wind before a storm. We are predators who learn to disguise ourselves as prey. We are the product of a world so lethal that it could only be survived by becoming more dangerous than the environment itself. The images around her faded, leaving Elena standing alone in the center of the chamber. But she wasn't really alone anymore. Every delegate could now see what had been hidden in plain sight. The coiled strength in her movements, the predator's awareness in her eyes, the hunter's patience in her stillness. So I ask you again, Elena said, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in the bones of every creature present. Do you really want to downgrade Earth's classification? Zixthala's mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in the Kethmori species. The Council requires time to reconsider the available data. Of course, Elena said graciously, settling back into her observer chair with movements that now looked disturbingly like a predator, returning to rest after demonstrating its capabilities. Take all the time you need. The vote, when it finally came 3 hours later, was unanimous. Earth received the galaxy's first-ever Deathworld Plus classification, along with a recommendation that all non-human visitors undergo extensive psychological preparation and survival training before being permitted to approach the system. As delegates filed out of the chamber, many took routes that led them as far from Elena as possible. Others approached her with expressions of newfound respect, or in some cases carefully controlled fear. Elena remained in her seat, making notes on her pad, as if nothing significant had happened. But as the chamber emptied, she allowed herself a small smile. Around the galaxy, alien parents would soon be telling their children stories about the small, soft creatures from the blue world, and for the first time in galactic history, those stories would be completely true. The chamber's lights dimmed as the cleaning systems activated, preparing the space for the next day's sessions. Elena gathered her materials and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the vast empty space. Behind her, the holographic display flickered back to life one last time, showing Earth in all its blue and green beauty. But now, anyone looking at that peaceful image would know the truth. It wasn't a garden world that had produced gentle beings. It was a forge that had created the most successful predators the galaxy had ever seen. And they were very, very good at hiding what they really were.